Good morning, or whatever time it is when you're watching this service. First off, I need to remind you to turn off your No, actually, you don't have to worry about turning off your cell phones. There are some advantages to being virtual, but if you want to turn it off anyway, just for old time's sake, go ahead. You know, for 71 years, our congregation has been offering a welcome Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. During our early years, we welcomed everyone to whatever rented space we were using at the time. In the late 60s through the early 90s, we welcomed people into our first home on 19th and Bremen Street, now home to our good Quaker friends. And then, until early last spring, we welcomed folks to our beautiful spiritual home from where I'm speaking right now. And now, we welcome you in virtual space. Someday, when it's safe to gather again in person, soon we hope, we will welcome you both here and virtually, because we're going to continue to record and share our services online. So welcome everybody. Welcome to this free faith community. Welcome into our spiritual shelter, even if it's virtual. Come on in out of the rain and the smoke and the fires. Come on in out of the climate of fear and hatred and discord. Welcome to this virtual and actual place of hope and healing. And as is our custom, let us turn and welcome one another. I would like to ask you right now to think of somebody you know, either very well or maybe not so well in our congregation. Think of a member of this congregation you miss seeing, or maybe somebody you think you should reach out to and just remind them, hey, you're welcome in our community, and we're glad you're a part of our community. Everyone is welcome.
Our opening hymn today is I've Got Peace Like a River. It's number 100 in the Gray Hymnal. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul.
Good morning. In the words of Dorothy Day, the 20th century social activist and Catholic political radical, people say, "What is the sense of our small effort?" They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast upon a pond causes ripples in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There's too much work to do. Together, let us say our affirmation. Love is our doctrine, compassion is our way. Here we seek to create a joyful home for free religious exploration, build a community of caring fellowship, and nurture the hope and serve the needs of our world. Each week, we light 3 chalices. The first is for this congregation, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Salem. We light our second chalice for our partner church in Šimanfalva, Transylvania, Romania. And we light our third chalice for our children and youth in religious exploration and all around the world. Let us sing the flame into life.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Hello, and welcome to the Time for All Ages portion of the service. I'm Lily Walker, Director of Lifespan Religious Education, and today I'm here to tell you a story that builds upon the theme of water communion. As you may know, we have 2 major ceremonies in this congregation that are like bookends for our programming year: flower communion and water communion. For flower communion, we celebrate what is special and beautiful about each of us. All of the different varieties of flowers brought in represent the way each of us brings something special and unique to our congregation. In water communion, the theme is opposite. In water communion, we celebrate the way each of us, like droplets of water, come together to create a larger body of water, like a stream, a mighty river, or a sacred sea. The story I'm going to tell you today is about the way we come together as one body of water, and the way the mighty river we have gathered here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Salem came together. It didn't happen overnight, as you shall see. This story is called The Stream by Robert Trollsty. All winter long, the earth had been covered with a blanket of snow. Now, Father Sun was regaining his strength and shining down upon the snowy hills and fields. Slowly, the top layers of snow began to melt, and trickles of water ran through the layers of snow and ice until they reached the frozen ground. One little rivulet of water found himself in a small rocky hollow. As the sun shone brighter, more water trickles joined him until the hollow was full. Finally, it could hold no more. The rivulet bulged over the edge and started on his course down the mountainside. Each day, as the snow melted, a small stream of water coursed down the path made by the rivulet. As the ground thawed, the pebbles became looser, and the rivulet pushed them aside, leaving a path where he had gone. All through the early spring, he grew stronger each day until he became a little stream. But when all the snow had melted, the water decreased, and soon the stream's bed was dry. So it remained throughout the summer and fall. The following spring, The stream ran full once more with icy waters of melted snow. Now more water flowed in his bed, for many pebbles and rocks had been swept aside. Other little rivulets joined the stream, and now he flowed with greater speed and force. Each day he carved his bed deeper into the hillside. Sometimes a large rock stood in his path, and he would work all day to dislodge it. Sometimes fallen branches blocked his way, but he skillfully worked his way under or around them. So he flowed each spring for several years before drying up again in the hot summer months. Each year the stream became faster and deeper, flowing farther down the hillside. And finally, one spring, he made it all the way down to the valley where the soil was softer. Each day the stream carved its way at its banks, smoothing them with his rushing waters, and the banks moved further and further apart, so now the stream could be called a river. Merrily he wandered through the valley, seeking a larger river who would take him all the way to the sea. As the years passed, the river continued to carve and smooth his bed. Gone were the little twists and turns where he had to bend to get around the rocks. Gone were the ripples and falls where the trees and ledges blocked the way. The river ran smoother and straighter than ever before. Through the years, the stones and pebbles that had lined the stream bed were ground down, and the fine, coarse sand glistened in the sun when the river ran low in the summertime. One winter, the snows fell and fell, piling in even deeper drifts in the hollow and hills. That spring, the river ran swifter and harder than ever before, tearing away the footbridges that spawned its breath, sweeping aside the docks that had been built on its banks. The bed of river couldn't hold all the water, and he overflowed his banks, flooding the fields on either side. The force of the water carved away the soft farmland, digging new bends here and there. As the years turned into centuries, the river grew broader and shallower, winding slowly and majestically through the valleys on his way to the sea. No longer straight and smooth, he curved and meandered through the fertile fields, taking in new sights. He was no longer in a hurry. His waters ran smooth and still, reflecting the white clouds above. How long ago it seemed that he had been but a rivulet of melted snow, or a fresh young stream coursing down the hillside. Now his grandchildren and great-grandchildren fed his waters as he made his steady way onwards towards the sea. May all beings be happy. Blessed be. Please do consider joining us next Sunday, October 4th, for the Children's Religious Education Program, being held live on Sunday mornings at 9:45 a.m. via Zoom.
We're living in a time of great discord and division. We're living in a time when we sometimes fail to recognize the humanity of those whose ideas and attitudes we oppose. Our vision becomes clouded. So let us find moments in our lives when we can pause and breathe and be present with ourselves. Let the swirling confusions and distractions in the snow globe of our being settle down so we can regain clarity of vision. Our vision of our highest and holiest dreams and aspirations. It is a time of sorrow. Recently, we have learned that over 200,000 in our country, 2.5 million around the world, have perished from the coronavirus. Even as I speak, that figure is rising. So many lives lost. Too often, the lives of those who are poor, marginalized, people of color. Let us grieve these losses. Let us be aware of the many millions who are now grieving the loss of friends and loved ones. Let us grieve the loss of lives in the wildfires that so recently swept through our state. Let us grieve the loss of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who served our nation so faithfully, courageously, and compassionately. In our own community, we have known loss. So often, before the pandemic, I would go out and greet people, and I would greet Rhonda Armour and her mother Twyler. They sat right over there, always. We'd exchange hugs. And when we return after the pandemic, I will only see Rhonda sitting out there for her mom, Twyler Medine Wolf, who shared with me the story of her life of love and generosity, a truly compassionate soul. She died on September the 21st in her 90th year. And Dinah Herman tells us that her mother-in-law, Erzsébet, has passed away in Hungary on September the 13th. And Dinah writes, she was the rock of her family, and she is greatly missed. And please say a prayer for her and for my husband, Nandor. Let us be aware of the sorrow within and around us, so that compassion may arise in our hearts. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for those around us, compassion for all those in our world. May we remember that ours is the path of compassion. Compassion and gratitude. I invited a friend to lunch this past week. We had a wonderful time. At the end of the meal, I asked the waiter for the bill. And then I realized I had forgotten my wallet. mortified, embarrassed, followed by peals of laughter from my friend who quipped, "I've never seen you blush before." And I realized it's actually easier for many of us to give, harder to receive. And I wonder why this is. I think the universe is inviting me to look more deeply into that. This I do know. Experiencing gratitude is to experience happiness. And the question forms in my mind, what stumbling blocks are standing in my way on the path to gratitude? For gratitude is our way. Let us walk it together. Amen.
Another way to stay connected with the UUC community is through sharing your own joys and concerns. Please see the website to contribute.
Our pastoral hymn this morning is "O Hear My People." It's number 219 in the Gray Hymnal. Oh, hear my people, hear me well. I have no need for sacrifice, but mercy, loving kindness shall alone for life and good suffice. Then source of peace, lead us to peace, a place profound and wholly true, and lead us to a mastery, or drives in us that war pursue. May deeds we do inscribe our names as blessings in the book of life. O source of peace, lead us to heal. O source of peace, lead us from strife.
This is a story about a gift that I was given and how it changed and grew in unexpected ways. The gift was my first name, Barbara, after my mother's sister, my Aunt Barbara. As a little girl, I was not fond of the name. It was difficult to wrap my tongue around all the R's. What's more, Aunt Barbara intimidated me. She lived in a big city in Massachusetts. She always dressed so formally. Below her perfectly coiffed hair were eyes that missed nothing. She hosted elaborate parties in her large colonial home and seemed to know everyone who mattered. In contrast, I, Barbara the younger, was a dungareed child of the countryside who took long walks with the dogs and rode horses. Over time, my name began to grow on me, or maybe I grew into my name. In any case, as I learned more, my perspective changed. This was especially true upon the death of my mother, whom I loved very much. It seemed natural to turn to Aunt Barbara for comfort and friendship. Indeed, she extended a hand to me, and over the years, I came to know her many dimensions. She invited me often to her beautiful home, where we would sit in the library and share family history, ideas, and experiences. This is when I learned how much she loved to laugh, her all-seeing eyes twinkling with tears, how much she cared about her city, from the bottom to the top, and her family, how often she had counseled my mother through hard times and invisibly supported my brothers and me through childhood. As the wife of a city newspaper publisher, Aunt Barbara also served her community with intelligent leadership, wit, and financial resources. She did know everyone who mattered and used her influence to help the less fortunate, invest in community development, and nurture civic pride. I began to hope that if a name could take on human qualities, my Aunt Barbara's wisdom, involvement, and generosity would rub off on me. When I made the decision to move to the Pacific Northwest for an academic position, Aunt Barbara was supportive and encouraging. We missed our spirited get-togethers, but made the most of our long-distance phone conversations. Then, one day, I received a smallish but curiously heavy package. It was from Aunt Barbara. I can see her eyes twinkling even now. Inside was a rock, smooth gray granite chiseled with these words, "Nothing is written in stone." Nothing is written in stone. Oh, Aunt Barbara, it's so true. Just when we think we have things figured out, something unexpected comes up. Will we be ready to respond, adapt, understand, help? I think she was telling me something important in that rock. Life is change. Be resilient and help others along the way. Not long after that, Aunt Barbara died in her sleep. She was 97 years old. I carry her name proudly now. During these uncertain times, I take heart that nothing is written in stone. We can and must imagine, construct, and share our dreams of hope. Incidentally, Aunt Barbara was Unitarian.
Thank you, Barbara, for that beautiful reflection. And thank you, Lorraine, for playing this morning. Thank you, Kit and Laura, for your music, too. And thanks to the tech crew that's here this morning, helping to make this service possible. A lot of people have made life in this congregation possible over the years, and I remember quite a number of them who are no longer with us. Some of you might remember Nina Ray Cleveland. Nina Ray, she passed in 2017. She was a very long-time member of this congregation. She and her husband, Mel, who died earlier, joined back in the early 1950s, in the very earliest days of our congregation. And when I visited Nina Ray at her home in Capitol Manor, where she spent her last few years, I always knew to schedule extra time for my visit. About 2 hours was about right, because she was such an engaging, entertaining conversationalist. Not to mention, she was a really fine writer. Her letters to the editor were gems. They were clear, they were succinct, and they were punchy, because she was usually speaking out against some outrageous or unjust or corrupt thing that was going on in the world. And she knew from the example of her own grandma that when you see something wrong going on, you say something. You speak up, even if nobody else is. Nina was just a really small, diminutive woman, and she would often say, if you think you're too small to be effective, you've never been in bed with a mosquito. Nina Ray had spunk. She had spunk. Everybody could see it. She had spunk when it was needed. And these days I'm wondering, I think some of that spunk rubbed off on me, because I feel more spunk sometimes when I see things wrong and I don't agree with it. I'm more inclined to speak up. And so I have benefited from knowing Nina Ray. Indeed, I have found inspiration and growth by virtue of my experiences with many of you, members and friends of this congregation. I'm grateful to you for the inspiration and encouragement you offer me in many ways, great and small, truly more than you'll ever know. I have a lot of names to grow into those embodiments of truth and compassion. So many of you have inspired me. And that's often the way it is in congregational life. We find encouragement and inspiration from one another. And it's often kind of a subtle thing. And yet, being in the presence of other good folks in a community dedicated to the practices of compassion and courage, this can't help but have a good effect on a person. Not to mention that we're social beings, and if we don't have the opportunity to mix and mingle and form relationships, we flounder. That's why we're especially concerned during this time of the pandemic to be able to reach out to you however we can in all the ways that we can. Congregations such as ours, not only do we have an uplifting impact upon one another, but we have an uplifting impact upon the surrounding community. Sometimes, just to get a perspective on this, I imagine what if this congregation didn't exist? What if it just didn't exist, had never come into being, and instead of being here on this corner, there was just an empty lot with invasive weeds, Himalayan blackberries, all sorts of other things that grow that aren't supposed to be growing in native Oregon soil? Or maybe, what if there was a gas station or something? Imagine all the good things that wouldn't have happened in our community, that wouldn't have happened here, all the worship services and the concerts. We've had so much wonderful music here over the years, the dances, the potlucks, the weddings, the memorial services, the quinceañeras, all the things that we do here, and all the ways that we serve the surrounding community. That just wouldn't have happened. Or it would have happened somewhere else, and it probably wouldn't have been as good. I could go down into the weeds here and describe all the different ways that we minister to one another and the surrounding community, but I believe you get the point. Research has been done by economists who've studied congregations such as ours, congregations that are committed to being of service both to members but also to the surrounding community. And the economists discovered, actually much to their surprise, that congregations have a very dramatic, positive, what they call a halo effect on the surrounding community. I was especially interested in reading the study of one congregation. It was about the same size as ours and about as involved in the community as we are. And the economists crunched some numbers, and they calculated that this one little congregation had a positive economic impact on the community of $2 million. It's not about the money, though. It's not about the money. It's about the value of the money, what we use our money to do, our liquid assets, of how we turn our liquid assets into liquid love that flows out and blesses so many people. Then, too, congregations are very remarkably enduring institutions. I learned this a few years back when I was speaking at the installation of a colleague in Massachusetts. I haven't gotten to go to Massachusetts many times, and I have fond memories of each visit. And it was an old Unitarian church. It was in the center of town. It had this clock tower. You could look, no matter which direction you came, you could tell what time it was because it was four-sided. And above the clock was a bell tower. And on Sunday mornings, when they rang that bell, I just loved that sound. I just loved it on Sunday mornings. And it just made me think, how many generations had heard that bell? In the church, in the parsonage, and the separate library that they owned, they were in such great condition. And you could tell that the members of this church, some of whom, and they came up and told me about this, they had ancestors who had founded this church over 4 centuries earlier in 1644. These people, they loved their church, and they took pride in it. Isn't that amazing? To me it is. This modest-sized congregation, it was about half the size of our congregation. It had survived through wars, revolutions, depressions, and all manner of societal changes. A lot has happened since 1644, and yet generation after generation of members continued to come and support this church, where they were reminded of life's higher meanings and purposes, and they were reminded that they are called to serve some greater good than their own selves, to serve the community, to serve society, to serve other people. It just so happens I was so proud to preach from that pulpit because my great hero, you've heard me speak of him in sermons here before, the abolitionist, the Reverend Samuel J. May, was once the minister of that church. And that just reminded me, and I preached from the same pulpit that he had spoken from too, and it just reminded me that great things come out of congregations. Life-affirming faith communities of all stripes provide a place for community to be created, and we need that so badly today, a place for community to be created. And we provide moral and spiritual grounding for the community at large. So maybe as I've been extolling the durability and the stability of congregations, you might have been thinking, well, maybe not always. Maybe you're thinking of, you've seen formerly vibrant downtown churches in many communities. There are some real architectural gems, and now they're restaurants or some other businesses. Whenever I see that, I always feel a little bit sad, and I wonder what the story is. There's a law office downtown. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's on the corner of Chemeketa and Cottage Streets. And if you look at that building, it's a law office. It's painted pale green. You look at the architecture, you can see this was not built as a law office. This used to be a church. I wonder what the story is behind that. I did a little research. Turns out that this building once did house a congregation that had been founded in Salem in 1890. They originally had another house further downtown that burned, and this was their next house. It was generously funded by the parent organization back east that held the deed to the building. Well, you remember what happened in 1929, the economic crash. Times were hard, really hard for people. And during most of the 1930s, The congregation struggled along, but eventually the parent organization decided that it needed to sell the building and invest in more promising communities than Salem at that time. And so they pulled the plug. And the Unitarian Church of Salem, Oregon ceased to be, went out of existence in 1938. You heard me right. The Unitarian Church of Salem went out of business in 1938. And that prime downtown location, once owned by the Unitarians, this was sold and has held a variety of occupants since. And now it's a law office where they have no time to talk to a curious minister, namely me. So, the first planting of our liberal religious tradition in this town, it didn't take. It dried up for lack of funds. The people probably could have continued meeting, but they didn't. They were so demoralized. They had no financial cushion that was going to see them through this hard time. And so they disbanded. I hear that the Women's Alliance continued to meet for a time, but even eventually I think even they stopped meeting. These early Unitarians had nearly half a century to build up a nest egg for hard times. Apparently, and some of the early members were some of the movers and shakers in town, so they were not without means. But apparently, they were not so much into building institutions as they were into enjoying what our free faith offered them. During the early years, they relied largely, you can look through the old records, they're up in our archives, you can look through the old records, and they relied upon the largesse of the American Unitarian Association back east rather than calling for their own members to help support the institution. And when the American Unitarian Association in Boston pulled the plug, the congregation had nothing. 11 years later, though, 1949, a Unitarian evangelist, I know that sounds funny, a Unitarian evangelist, but that's what he was. His name was the Reverend Lon Ray Call. And Lon Ray Call was traveling all across the United States, and he would put ads in the paper before he came. And he said, if 10 people show up and meet with me, we can form a Unitarian fellowship in your community. And so they met here in Salem. Lon Ray Call met at the old, now demolished Senator Hotel. It's where the bus station is now. And they met. And we wonder if Barbara Hanneman had not found a babysitter and hadn't been able to come, I wonder what would have happened, because we wouldn't have had the bare minimum to start. Just a good reminder, one person can really make a difference. And now here we are, 71 years later. We're a stable and we're a strong congregation. For now. During our lifetime, congregational lifetime, we've done amazing things. One of the most amazing was creating our beautiful home here, which just keeps getting more beautiful all the time. And we have long been debt-free thanks to the extraordinary generosity of those who contributed to our building fund as they were financially able. All these gifts, great and small, allowed us to be where we are now. And it's a good place to be for now. But as I look ahead, I see some pretty dark clouds on the horizon. Our world is undergoing great transformations. We don't know what the future holds. We're called to prepare for the future of this beloved congregation. So, how much do you think we have in our nest egg, our endowment? Over the 71 years of our existence, we've accumulated about $100,000 in our endowment fund. That might sound like a lot of money, but actually it's less than a third of our annual operating budget. Yikes. That's not much insurance for future generations. And it used to be less than $100,000 for a long time. And this has bothered me greatly for a number of years, because I wouldn't want this congregation, which we've worked so hard to build, to fall prey to hard times because we hadn't thought ahead. We hadn't planned for future generations. But thanks. Thank you, George Struble. Thank you for your extraordinary leadership. George, you also led our major gift and building campaigns that enabled us to fulfill our hope of creating this beautiful home. And thanks to you, George, and thanks to many others of you, we're not going to drop this ball, not on our watch. We're beginning our first ever in 71 years, better late than never, we're beginning our first coordinated endowment campaign in which my family and I will gladly participate. And at the end of this campaign, we're going to be delighted and amazed to see what we have done and the pattern we will have set for future generations. Do I have a crystal ball? Can I look into the future? How can I be so certain? Well, I've been around a while, and I've learned that you are trustworthy and committed, and you rise to the occasion when you need to. So during my visit to that old New England church, I thought to ask the minister about their endowment. This small church, half our size, I said, "How much do you all have in your endowment?" $5.2 million, they told me. They just have to spend a portion of the interest income. That's how come they can do all sorts of expensive things that the operating budget wouldn't be able to support. They're ready for whatever emergencies might arise. Compound interest gets you real traction over the years. And now that congregation is on rock-solid ground and is a rock-solid presence in that small town south of Boston. And that's what we're creating with our endowment campaign, a rock-solid foundation for this congregation that will see us through the storms and the revolutions and whatever adversities might come. This will be a place where people will know that they can come to find the deeper meanings and higher purposes in their lives, and that will serve as a moral beacon in the community during whatever dark and turmoil times may come. I love this quote from William James. He wrote, "The great use of a life is to spend it for something that outlasts it." Will you join me in a time of quiet reflection, prayerful reflection? We build on foundations we did not lay. We warm ourselves by fires we did not light. We sit in the shade of trees we did not plant. We drink from wells we did not dig. We profit from persons we did not know. This is as it should be. Together, we are more than any one person could be. Together, we can build across the generations. Together, we can renew our hope and faith in the life that is yet to unfold. Together, we can heed the call of a ministry of care and justice. We are ever bound in community. May it always be so. So says my beloved colleague, Reverend Peter Rabel, who once stood at this pulpit and spoke, who has now passed. Amen.
Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "We have a great deal more kindness than is ever spoken. The whole human family is bathed with an element of love, like a fine ether." We support UUCS through our pledges, time, and connections with one another. We support the Salem community through donations to the Marion Polk Food Share, and for the month of September, CAUSA, a nonprofit that improves the lives of Oregon's Latino immigrants through advocacy, leadership training, and civic engagement. Please send your checks to UUCS or visit the website to donate. Thank you for helping our congregation and the wider community of Salem. And to donate, please examine the slide in front of you. Click on the Contribute and then view your options. We take the light from our chalice to light the social justice lantern as a symbolic reminder of the light and justice we carry out into the world. As we extinguish the chalices, let us reflect on these words from this Jewish prayer. Grant us the ability to find joy and strength, not in the strident call to arms, but in stretching out our arms to grasp our fellow creatures in the striving for justice and truth.
I have a few announcements. I would like to remind you, you still have time. A number of you have sent in pictures of your pets or animals that you love for our animal blessing service next week, but you still have opportunity to do that. So you can see the slide up there that tells you how you can do that. Also, I would like to remind you that you're, at least whoever gets here, the next 40 people who get here, we have a free copy of a book called Don't Label Me, an amazing conversation for divided times. I got the last part of that title wrong, but the book is here for you. We'll be here on Tuesdays from 9 to 1, and Wednesday and Thursdays from 5 to 7 if you want to drop by and get a free copy of this book. We'd love for you to read it before our speaker, Irshad Manji, the author, speaks to us in a question and answer period in the last Sunday of October. So she wants us to read the book so that we can ask questions that pertain to her field of expertise, which is really basically moral courage. I'd like to also invite you to look at all the announcements that are listed, all the activities and ways to be involved in the life of our community. And finally, I'd like to ask you to listen most attentively to George Struble as he comes up and tells us a little bit more about our endowment campaign. George.
Thank you. I'm George Struble. I've been a UU for over 60 years and a member of this congregation since 1986 or 84, something like that. And I've done a lot of things in this congregation, and so this is another one. Today is the beginning of our legacy campaign. As you've heard from Rick, our congregation is not really well prepared for the future. The maintenance reserve and emergency reserve are pitifully small. To be well prepared, they should be about $200,000 each. Our endowment is just over $100,000. That's an achievement, but it should be $3 billion or so. The previous generation built this church. That was quite an achievement. This was their legacy to you, to us. It's our turn to pay it forward. You have read in our newsletter about past bequests and the members who made them. You have seen our booklet that arrived in your mailboxes this week. If you did not receive one and want one, tell me. We started our campaign quietly several months ago. We discovered end-of-life commitments already made by our members of $740,000. In these last 2 months, some congregation leaders have committed another $148,000. Those are good examples for the rest of us. Our goal in this campaign is $1 million, in addition to the $740,000. We also have an incentive. One couple will commit $50,000 when our total reaches $450,000, and another $50,000 when the total reaches $950,000. We are asking for very broad participation, asking you to stand with your fellow members. Some older members are giving cash now, but many of you are struggling. We ask you to look toward the future. Commit some percentage of your estate or retirement account, something. There are 8 of us on a campaign committee. We are listed on the back cover of our booklet. All of us are very willing to talk with you if you would like consultation to figure out what works best for you. If you don't need that consultation, congratulations. Complete the legacy record form that arrived in your packet and return it to me, or just email me the information. Those sheets will be very closely guarded. Very few people will have access to those. But they establish eligibility toward the incentive contribution. I was thrilled to stand with our united, dedicated congregation when we raised the money to build this church. We shared a deep bond of commitment. I would be thrilled to feel that again with you. You can be too. We can put our congregation on a firmer footing for the future. Let's do it. Thank you.
Our closing hymn today is This Little Light of Mine. It's number 118 in the gray hymnal. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Let us join hands in person or in spirit with our community members, guests, family, and friends, saying these words together. May faith in the spirit of life, hope for the community of earth, and love for the sacred in one another be ours now and in all the days to come.